Hello everyone, welcome to Indian Economy by Aman Soni. In today's news hour, we will be discussing the important articles related to economy from the Hindu newspaper. In the editorial page, there is a news about stagflation. What is stagflation? The word stagflation is a portmanteau word. It is a combination of inflation and stagnation. If you add stagnation and inflation, it is stagflation. So what is this situation of stagflation? When there is too much increase in the prices of goods and services, which is called inflation, the consumption by the people reduces, because if the incomes are same and the wages of people are not inflation indexed, the inflation would be same, and people in the times of war and other economic disruptions, they would be saving more and more and would be consuming less. In this situation, the consumption would fall, and because of which the aggregate demand in the economy would be less. Because the demand would be less, the production would be less, and the manufacturers also will think that even if I produce, there won't be any future consumption, any future demand, and the cost of production also will keep increase because the input cost will increase. So one side the demand is falling, consumption is falling, other side there is increase in the cost of the input, say for example the crude oil prices. So increase in the cost of input means the final product's cost also would be higher. So because of which the manufacturers also would reduce the production. If the production is reduced, more and more people would be thrown out of the jobs, so the unemployment will increase. So if this situation continues, finally it will lead to recession, because there is more unemployment and the incomes would be low, because of which the demand would be low. So this will be a vicious cycle, which is bad for the economy. So stagflation is such a situation where a high inflation and high input costs would drive down the consumption demand and the growth in the economy. On one side there is inflation, on the other side there is no growth in the economy. The economy is stagnating. That is why the stagnation. And when the economy is stagnating and the inflation is high, it will lead to increase in unemployment. Such a situation is stagflation. Now the editorial says, because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the supply chain disruptions and the sanctions, the prices of several goods are increasing. All the commodity prices are increasing. We have discussed here how the increase in oil prices and the increase in the input raw material prices will increase the final goods output. So the producer may not produce it because he has to incur more costs to produce, and he is not sure the demand is going to be there or not in the future. And the prices of the Brent is also increasing. Prices of natural gas is also increasing. The supplies from Russia and Ukraine are getting disrupted. So the prices of oil and gas is increasing all over the global markets. And the cost of electricity is going to be high. The shipping costs and the container costs are getting disrupted. As we have discussed here, we can see how the input costs are increasing in the global economy, because of which the producers may not produce those goods because there won't be any future demand if the cost is increasing like this. And in such a situation, there is going to be future unemployment, and analysts predict that the crude oil prices would almost go to $180 to $200 per barrel in the future. And if such a situation happens, it is very bad for the economy, and the government has two options here. Currently, it either has to reduce the tax rates on the fuel in order to protect the Indian economy from the impact of the crude oil increase. If the government reduces the taxes on the fuels, the input cost would be comparatively lower, but the government would risk losing the revenue here. So if the government reduces taxes, it will lose the revenue, and it has to borrow more, and it will lead to current account deficit and fiscal increase in the fiscal deficit. If the government doesn't reduce the taxes, it has to still pay more for the increase in the crude oil prices, and increase in the crude oil prices mean it has to borrow more to pay, again it will lead to increase in the current account deficit and increase in the fiscal deficit. So this is a catch 22 situation, that one side, if you reduce the taxes, you will lose the revenue and your fiscal deficit and current account deficit will increase. On the other side, if you don't increase, the higher prices can lead to stagflation and there will be future recession in the economy. At that time, again you would have to borrow more to kickstart the economy. That's about this article. Here, this article talks about the health impacts of the tobacco consumption in India. The tobacco consumption kills almost 1.35 million Indians every year, and daily on an average, almost 3,500 Indians die. And the author calls this as a silent killer. And the tobacco consumption also has the economic cost. It is almost, we are losing only 1% of GDP because of that. And the author says from the last 4-5 years, the taxes on tobacco have not been increased. Even when the prices, the inflation is increasing, when the taxes on something is not increased, the overall amount of taxes which make up the price of the goods would be same, the percentage of which would reduce. So the impact of tobacco on the end consumer of the taxes is reducing, because if you want to deter a person from consuming something, you have to increase taxes. If you put high taxes on tobacco products, it would deter so many consumers and they would reduce the consumption of tobacco products. By doing that, the government can save the health of the citizens. But you have not been increasing the taxes, the tobacco products become more affordable, and if they are more affordable, people will get used to it more and they get habituated. So the author concludes by saying that the GST Council has to make sure that it increases the rates and cess on the tobacco products in order to discourage people from consuming the tobacco products. In the world page, in this article, now USA has imposed a ban on import of Russian oil. It would not impact USA's economy that much because USA only imports 8% of its crude oil, and USA has huge reserves of shale gas. And currently USA is also in talks with the Venezuelan government and trying to reduce sanctions on it so that it can import oil from Venezuela. And the US government recently has almost released 30 million barrels of crude from its strategic reserves into the global market. But compared to the US, the European economies can't take such high sanctions on Russia in terms of natural gas and oil, because almost 40% of the natural gas of Europe, the needs are met by the Russia. And currently UK has told that it imports 6% of its oil from the Russia, but it would take another year to slowly reduce the imports and diversify its needs. It can't take any sudden steps because already the electricity prices are high in the European market, and if these countries take knee-jerk reactions, it would lead to further increase in the electricity cost in the European market, which would impact the European consumers. In the business page, once we have understood the concept, we need not go through all the news details. Here we just need to read the headlines and see oil price increase will affect the economy. So we have discussed in editorial how oil prices would impact the economy and what the government has to do and what is the position of the government. Again, same with this article, we just need to read the headlines now and move forward. Because of war, the steel prices might keep increasing in the future. Again, we need not go through the numbers and all the details related to that. We just need to read the headlines, understand the concept and go on. War's impact on credit market may be limited. Currently, the domestic banks, the liquidity in the domestic banks in the India is good. But if the war is going to be prolonged, then it would affect the liquidity of the capital markets, because all the investors would be wary of investing in any country because of the war-like situation, because of instability. In such a time, there would be liquidity problem, and those banks and financial institutions which have weak financial position, they would be affected in the long term. But on the other hand, those banks which have very good liquidity, they won't be affected. Again, we just need to read the headlines. Like any other industry, even the diamond industry in India is going to be affected because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Because India is home to almost 90% of polishing of diamond business. We import the rough diamonds, we polish them, and we export them again. And almost 90% of the uh, importing of rough diamonds and polishing happens in India, especially in the Gujarat hub in the Surat. And Russia is the biggest miner. 30% of the supplies of rough diamonds comes from a company called Alrosa. And currently there are no sanctions imposed on Alrosa. But if there are sanctions imposed on Alrosa and Alrosa can't export rough diamonds to other countries, the diamond business in India would get directly affected. These are the articles related to economy today. Thank you so much.